Okay, in this video I'm going to talk to you about how to write a for loop. Right, so whenever you write a loop, it comes with it has four components. Right, the first thing you need is you need to declare a control variable for the loop. The next thing is you need to initialize the control variable. Then you need to write a loop continuation condition. Okay, and the last thing, you need to increment the control variable. Right, so every loop has these four things. Alright, so how do we do that using a for loop? Right, so with the for loop, you start off with the keyword for, then you declare your control variable. So in this case we'll call it int counter. Then the next thing is you initialize the control variable. I'm going to set it to 1. Then you need to write your loop continuation condition. So I want to print out the value of counter. I want to print it out 10 times. So then my condition, my logical test would be counter is less than or equal to 10. Right, so I want this for loop to repeat the statements, repeat them while counter is less than 10. Right, but if we don't update the counter, because our counter is at 1 right now, if we don't update it by incrementing the control variable, so I'll write that here, counter plus plus, then the loop will continue running forever. Right, we need to alter the control variable in order to get the loop to stop running and only run a certain number of times. So here we wanted to go from 1 go all the way to 10. Alright, so we have the four things. First we declared the control variable, then we initialized it with 1, then I wrote the loop continuation condition right here, and then the last thing was I incremented the control variable. Okay, and then the for loop has a left brace and a right brace. Okay, so now I wanted to display the value of counter 10 times. So the way I can do that is I'm going to do console dot write, and then I'm going to use a placeholder. I'm going to space once, then I'm going to put counter as my variable. Right, so the value of counter will be displayed until it's greater than 10. Okay, so let me run this. I have an error. Oh, don't forget to capitalize main. Okay, there you go. I meant to do that. No, not really. Okay, so now let's run it. Control F5. Right, and then we print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so that works pretty good. Now the other repetition statement I would like to show you is going to be the do while. We're going to make the same program we're going to print out the value of counter 10 times using the do while. All right. Okay, so with a do while, we need to do the same thing. Declare a control variable. So I'm going to call int counter. Okay, so that is the control variable. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize the counter. So counter equals 1. Initialize. Then we need to write the loop continuation condition. Okay, so let me show you the syntax for do while. So it's going to be do space left brace, enter, maybe enter twice, then right brace or curly brace, then you type while, semicolon, and then you need your condition. In this condition, I want counter to display 10 times. All right, so we do counter less than or equal to 10. So we want the statements in this loop to run until counter exceeds 10. Okay, and so then I'm going to do the same statement I wrote earlier to display the output to the screen. Okay, so this is my loop continuation condition. So while counter is less than or equal to 10, I keep executing this statement. But actually we need to execute one more statement because we need the last part of the loop, which is to increment the control variable, and that always goes inside the loop. So it's going to be counter plus plus. So I could run it, right? And we get the same program that we had earlier. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to go over real briefly is how to use logical operators. All right, so I'm going to get rid of all this. So now we're going to start with logical operators. Right, and these are the kind you would use in whenever you're writing conditions, such as in a loop, in an if statement, in a do while, in a for loop. You would use logical operators there. So let me demonstrate that. The main logical operators we're going to be working with is going to be AND, or, not, and there's one more, but we probably won't use it too often. It's going to be called XOR, or exclusive OR. Alright, so I'll talk about that in a moment. So the other thing I was going to introduce you to also are going to be the bool data type. Which holds one of two values. Right? It's either true or false. Right? So let me demonstrate this. Right? So to use a bool, you type bool, and we'll call this test1, and we can either set it to true, right? Or you could set it to false. Or what you could do, instead of setting it to one or the other, we could write some sort of logical test. And the result of that logical test can be stored here in test 1. Alright, so we'll start with the AND conditional operator. So logical and conditional. I'll put that there. Right. So first, I'm going to create a set of parentheses. And then here I'm going to put some sort of logical expression. The result of that expression will be saved in this bool data type. Alright, so if I have something that is false and something else that's false, right, then the result of that will be stored here. Right, and we'll talk about the result in a little bit. So I'm going to show you 4 examples here. And 4. Okay, so false and false. False, true. True, false, and then finally true, true. Right? So we have this operator in between. So what this is saying is this entire expression here will only be true if both sides are true. So the only one that returns a true value is going to be test 4 because both conditions here are true. Right? So with AND, they both have to be the same, or they both have to be true in order for the whole expression to be true. Right? So this is false, false. So this entire expression evaluates the false. This one is false and true. So the entire thing is false. Here we have a true and a false. So the whole thing is false. And then finally here we have true, true. So test 4, if I print the value in test 4 out to the screen, it should display the word true. The rest of them will display false. So let's test it out. Okay, so this is going to be conditional and it looks like this. Okay, so let's see what the result of all these tests are. Okay, so then console.write line okay, so false and false will return this, and here I'm going to pass test 1. I'm going to get this statement, I'm going to copy it. Okay, this was false, true. True, false, and then finally true and true. And this would be test 1, test 2, test 3, and test 4. Okay. Now let's take a look at it, see what the result is. Right, so we have conditional AND. So when both sides are false, the entire statement is false. When one side is false and the other is true, it's false. If the first side is true but the second side is false, then the whole thing is false. And then finally we have true and true, which if both sides, you know, both sides are true, then the entire expression is true. Okay, so that's how AND works. I'll show you an example once we go through every operator. Alright, so the next one we need to go through is OR. Alright, so I'm going to change the operator here to do OR. It's going to look like this. Two pipes. Okay, so now this would be conditional OR. Pipe. Oh, sorry. Okay, so for a conditional OR, when both sides are false, the entire expression is false. When one expression is false or true for the other expression, then the entire thing is true. If one side is true, the other side is false with an OR, then it's true. And if one side and the other side are both true, then the entire statement or expression is true as well. Right? That's for OR. Okay, so how would we use something like this? Right? So let's say I have a grade. Int grade. And I won't set a value yet. Right? A valid grade in a class, let's just say, or in a course, usually is either 0 through 100. Right? So anything that is below 0 is not valid. Anything above 100 is not valid either. We're not giving any bonus points, so we don't want anyone having more than 100 points as a grade. Right? So let's say I write a condition to check if grade is valid or not. Right? So if grade is less than or actually if it's less than 0, right, because 0 is valid but anything less than 0 is not, or grade is greater than 100, then print something like console.writeLine grade is invalid. Else grade is valid. Right? But we haven't set grade to anything. So let's test this out. I'm going to set grade equal to, let's say, 95. Right? So is 95 less than 0? No. Is 95 greater than 100? No. Right? So neither of these are true, and since this is OR, it's false and false, that means 95 is valid, right? So this expression here evaluates to false. right? So right now it's false, right? So we should get to the screen, grade is valid. Okay, so let's try this out, see if it works. Okay, so the grade is valid because neither condition evaluated to true, right? So now let me set this to -2. Is -2 less than 0? Yes. So automatically, since this is an OR statement, we know the entire expression is true, right? So is -2 greater than 100? No, it's not either. So in that case, then the grade is invalid. Yeah, so grade is invalid. So we got this one here because at least this one was true. I'm sorry, yes, this one was true and this one was false, right? Because -2 is not greater than 100. -2 is less than 0, right? So we check for either condition, right? Because sometimes numbers could be less than 100 or less than 0, I'm sorry, or they could be greater than 100. So let's say I put 1000. Is 1000 less than 0? No. So that's false. Is 1000 greater than 100? Yes. So then the entire thing, since this is an OR, is true. So then we should get again, grade is invalid. Right? Grade is invalid. Okay. So now how could I write a condition to check if a grade is valid, but instead of using OR, I'm going to use AND. Right? With an AND, both sides have to be true. Right? So only this one here, let's say this was AND, then both of these have to evaluate to the same, they have to be both true in order to get a true statement back or a true result. Right? So how can we write that to check if the grade is between 0 and 100? Right? So if grade is greater than or equal to 100 and grade is less than or equal to 100, right? So right now we have, and then we're gonna have to switch these conditions. So this is valid, this would be invalid now, right? So here, is 1000 greater than or equal to 0? Yes. And is 1000 less than or equal to 100? False, right? Because this condition is false, the entire expression is false. So we should get the result, we should get the else instead, and that would be grade is invalid. Right? So if I run it, yeah, grade is invalid. Right? Because it was outside the range. Alright, so let's say I put 95. Is 95 greater than or equal to 0? Yes. Is 95 less than or equal to 100? Yes. So the grade is valid. Right? Yes. Let me put -19. Is -19 greater than or equal to 0? No. Is -19 less than or equal to 100? Yes. Even though this was true, this condition initially was not. So that means that the entire expression is also false. Okay, so let's run it. Yeah, so grade is invalid, right? Because we had a negative 19. Okay, so the next logical operator I want to go over is going to be logical XOR. Right, so I'm going to change this to logical XOR, and the symbol is going to be the caret. Right, so then we'll have caret here, caret there, caret, and caret. I'm going to get rid of this. Okay. So now let's see what the expression is, the result of the expression. Okay, so what is XOR? XOR stands for exclusive OR. Let me write that here. Exclusive OR. Right? So what does that mean? That means that only one side of this logical expression can be true. If they're both false, or if they're both true, then the entire statement, the entire expression is false. We could either have one true or the other true, but we can't have both, right? And they can't both be false. Right, so let's see the result of this. Right, so the first one is false, the second one is true, the third one is true, and if they're both true, then the entire expression is false. Okay, so the last logical operator I want to go over with you is going to be the logical NOT, or the logical negation, which is what it's called. Logical negation. And the symbol is an exclamation mark. Right? So I'm going to get rid of these two here. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. Right? And then I'm going to put an exclamation there and another exclamation there. Or actually, this might look a little bit better. I'll put it on the outside of the exclamation here. Okay. Get rid of this. Right? So when a condition evaluates to false, when you put the not or the negation operator next to it, then it becomes true. If something is true, then not makes it false. All right, so let's run that. All right, so hold on. Sorry about that. Okay. Right, so if something is not false, it's true. And if something is not true, it's false. Right, so that's how that operator works. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show you was how to write a switch statement. So I'm going to get rid of all this. Okay, switch statement. A switch statement is pretty much another way of writing an if-else if statement. Alright, so let me show you how it works. So let's say we have int grade, and we have string letter grade. Right, so based on the value of grade, we want to print a letter grade. Right, and normally a grade between 100 and 90 has a letter grade of an A. Right, so we could say this. Right, we could say this is an A. Right. Anything that's let's just say 89.9 to 80 is a B. 79.9 to okay. Okay, so let's say for the letter grade, we have A, B, C, D, and F. Right? So anything between 90 and 100 is an A. Anything that's 89 to 80 is a B. Anything that is 79 to 70 is a C. Anything that's 69 to 60 is a D. And anything lower is an F. Alright, so we can use a switch statement to determine what the letter grade is. Right, so to do a switch, use first of all the keyword switch. Then you pass some sort of integer value, maybe grade. Then you open you type the left brace and then the right brace. Right, and we have an error here because we haven't initialized grade yet. So let's say I have 83, and we want the switch to assign one of these letters to letter grade. Right, so then we have different cases, right? But the thing is, with a case statement, you can't write a range. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to get grade, and I'm going to have to divide it by 10. Right, so if I divide grade by 10, in this case, integer division, 10, that's going to give me back an 8. That 8 should give me back a B. Alright, so let's write each case statement. So case, we have case 10. In the event that our grade was 100, right? 100 divided by 10 is 10. Alright, so we have case 100, and we also have case 9. So let's say the grade was 99. So in both of these cases, we want the letter grade equals an A. Right? Then let's say we have case 8. Case 7. Case 6. And anything else is an F. Right? Every time you write a case statement you need to also include a break statement, right? Because once we determine the letter grade, we don't need to run the other cases, right? Because we already know the grade is an A. We can print back to the user we can print back the appropriate letter grade, right? So in the case where we have 99, 100, 93, all those should return back an A. But let's say the grade was lower. Let's say we had the 83 that we initially started with. Then we'll make letter grade AB. And since we already have a grade, we don't need to evaluate the rest of these statements, right? So then we do break. Okay, and then you kind of get the pattern here. And then the last default case, anything else that is, if grade divided by 10 doesn't give me this number, this number, this one, or this one, it gives me a 5 or lower, then we know the grade was a 50 or a 40, and the letter grade is actually an F. Okay, so let's try this program out. Right, so our grade was initialized to 83, so that gave me back a B. Let's say the student failed, they got a 53, then that's an F. Right, let's say the grade was 100, then the letter grade was an A.